Okay, today we're going to be explaining how the animal rights laws violate the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution. Understand the Fifth Amendment protects your private property rights, and the government cannot enact any laws that deprive you of the use or ownership of your property without paying you just and equitable compensation for your property. Well, the animal rights laws never include a compensation clause to pay you for your property that they're depriving you of the full use of. See, only you can determine what rights you give to your animals and what the proper use of your animals is or are. Uh, Another human being does not have the authority to supersede God and tell you what the use of your property of your animals are for you or to you. Uh, For instance, the laws criminalizing the gamecock industry. Uh, the the gamecocks are property. Even the federal courts, like the Louisville Kennel Club versus Jefferson County Metro, states animals are property. You check your state farming laws and under your state constitution. It'll also tell you what your livestock, your animals are property. So if animals are property, or since animals are property, your animal rights laws are a deprivation of use. They're telling you what you can do and what you cannot do with your property, with your animals. The every livestock animal has its own method of harvest, such as uh, you shoot a beef cow, you shoot a cattle in the head with a gun. That's the way you harvest them. You harvest a goat by hanging it up by its back feet and you cut its throat. You harvest fish by throwing them onto a block of ice and allowing them to suffocate. You harvest a deer by shooting it through the lungs and allowing it to drown in its own blood. Even within the same species, you have different methods of harvest, such as dairy cattle and beef cattle differ in their method of harvest. Quarter horses and race horses differ in their method of harvest. Egg-laying chickens and broiler chickens and game chickens differ in their method of harvest. Gamecock farmers and ranchers are exactly that. We are farmers and ranchers that are attempting to harvest our livestock to earn a living and provide for our families. And our government does not have the authority to deprive us of that right of use of our property, unless the government places a higher value on the chickens we own than it does our human rights. Because law enforcement officers are then empowered and told to go out, make raids, rip our families apart, point guns at the gamecock farmers, create situations where you may have to use force, including deadly force. You might have to kill a few of those gamecock farmers, but the purpose of the government is to defend the chickens that the farmer owns. Understand how what the government is doing with that. The government is actually placing a higher value on a chicken than it is the human rights of the owner. And you have to understand that Adolf Hitler used these exact same animal rights laws, or this type of animal rights laws, in order to destroy human rights in Nazi Germany. There's actually a research paper by Boris Sachs that's titled Understanding Nazi Animal Protections and the Holocaust. And in the research paper, this college professor states that the Nazis enacted animal rights laws in order to reduce man to the status of an animal, thereby allowing the government to treat some segments of society like animals. Well, you have to understand where this law is coming from, or these laws are coming from, such as the Humane Society of the United States. Most people don't realize that the Humane Society of the United States was created in 1954 by a man named Fred Myers. Fred Meyer was actually called in front of Congress in 1956, where he had to testify for his known ties to 3 communist organizations. And the first auditor of the Humane Society was a guy named David Weingard. David Weingard was also the auditor for the American Humane Association, another animal rights group. And David Weingard and Fred Meyer were both very prominent leaders in an organization called the Russian War Relief, and even the federal government acknowledges the Russian War Relief was a known KGB front. See, the Humane Society and these animal rights groups were created as propaganda organizations, propaganda or NGOs, for the purpose of convincing the people to accept communism and communist controls. There's a congressional investigator, Norman Dodd. He was appointed to the chairman of the Reese Commission. And in the Reese Commission, his job as a Reese Commission chairman was to go out and investigate all of the nonprofit organizations across America. He did so. He came back and reported to Congress nearly every nonprofit organization created in America since at least 1954 was created for the purpose of forcing communism on the people of the United States. Let that sink in. This is what's been going on now since the 1950s, laying the foundations for communism on the foundation of animal rights laws, reducing man to the status of an animal, depriving man of their First Amendment rights, their Fourth Amendment rights, their Fifth Amendment right to property. If you go look up the definition of communism, its own definition is communism is the abolition of private property rights. And that's exactly what these animal rights laws accomplish. Going back to your harvest, you harvest a racehorse by putting it onto a racetrack and you compete it against another racehorse. That's simply the method of harvest of a racehorse. You're testing it for the creature for the natural genetic traits that God put into the creature to run fast over long distances. Sometimes it results in a horse dying or being injured or having to be put down and killed. Well, gamecock farmers and ranchers, we are doing the same thing. We're putting our gamecocks into a competitive event and competing it against another gamecock to test it for the natural genetic traits that God put into the creature when he created it. For courage, offensive fighting ability, defensive fighting ability, stamina, all of these same attempts, and sometimes some die in that harvest. But the purpose of the harvest is for the gamecock farmer is to test their genetic bloodlines in an attempt to earn a living and provide for their families through the economic and sporting and cultural method of harvest of a gamecock. So I hope you enjoyed this little presentation. I would encourage everyone to go get a copy of my book. The title of the book is God Gave Man Dominion, the Foundation of American Government. In the book, I explain these arguments, how the animal rights laws violate the First, the Fourth, the Fifth, the Eighth, the Ninth, the 10th, by and through the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. I also explain where all of these animal rights laws are coming from, how they're all tied back to communism. And if you'll find my book, you can look it up on It's printed by a company called Lulu Press, which is an on-demand print company. And we will come back with you later and do some more of these recordings. But please go research that book. It's 468 pages. The first half of the book explains what's behind all these animal rights laws, how it's all tied to communism. The second half of the book is the actual motions to dismiss that were filed, that I wrote, that were filed in a court case in Caldwell County, Oklahoma. And that court has refused to walk into the courtroom with these gamecock farmers, and it's been over 7 years. And they will not walk into the courtroom with these gamecock farmers because they cannot overcome those constitutional arguments that are in this book. I appreciate your time. Have a good day.